The black stallion exploded beneath her like a coiled storm finally set loose. Everyone watching knew this was where she'd die. Thrown into the frozen Montana dirt, neck snapped, another fool woman who thought she could tame what couldn't be tamed. But Evelyn Hart didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just held on while Reaper tried to rip himself apart beneath her, and somewhere in that terrifying minute, the impossible happened. The beast that had broken every cowboy who touched him stopped. If you want to know how a seamstress from Helena conquered the most savage horse in the Judith Basin, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The Judith Basin stretched out like a punishment, endless, wind-scraped, and colder than mercy. Caleb Mercer stood on his porch at dawn, coffee going lukewarm in his hands, watching the same horizon he'd been watching for 20 years. His ranch covered 3,000 acres of Montana frontier, ran 200 head of cattle, employed 6 men who spoke more to horses than to each other, and felt about as warm as a graveyard. He was 41 years old. He'd built this place with his bare hands, survived droughts that killed his neighbors' herds, outlasted winters that froze cattle standing upright in the fields. But the house behind him, the house he'd raised alone, felt emptier every year. Caleb didn't think much about loneliness anymore. Thinking about it didn't fix it. He drained his coffee, tossed the grounds into the dirt, and headed toward the corrals where his men were already working. The ranch ran like a machine because he'd designed it that way. No wasted motion, no wasted words, just work, sunrise to sunset, until exhaustion made sleep possible. His foreman, Dutch, a grizzled man in his 50s with a face like weathered leather, met him at the barn. "Fence on the north pastures down again," Dutch said. "Elk came through last night." "How bad?" 40 feet, maybe more. "We can patch it, but it'll take the better part of the day." Caleb nodded. "Get Wade and Miller on it. I'll check the south line." Dutch hesitated. "You got that meeting in town this afternoon." Caleb had forgotten. Some fool thing about a woman arriving on the afternoon train. A mail order arrangement he'd agreed to during a moment of whiskey-soaked weakness 6 months ago. He'd written the letters half drunk, convinced himself it was practical. The ranch needed a woman's hand. The house needed life. He needed something. Now the whole thing felt like a mistake. "I'll be back in time," Caleb said. "You want me to go instead?" "No." He didn't know why he said it. Maybe because backing out now would make him feel more pathetic than going through with it. He saddled his horse, a sturdy roan mare named Steady, and rode out toward the southern fence line. The wind cut through his coat like it had a personal grudge. This far out, a man could ride for an hour without seeing another living soul. Just grass, sky, and the mountains in the distance like broken teeth. Caleb liked it that way. He found the fence intact, checked the posts anyway, then sat on his horse for a while, watching nothing in particular. He thought about the woman coming on the train. Evelyn Hart, 27 years old, worked as a seamstress in Helena, answered his advertisement with a letter that sounded too smart for what he was offering. "I'm not looking for romance," she'd written. "I'm looking for a future that doesn't depend on someone else's charity." He'd like that. No illusions, no fairy tales. Still, he figured she'd take one look at the ranch and get back on the train. Evelyn Hart stepped off the afternoon train into a wall of wind that nearly knocked her sideways. She grabbed her hat with one hand, her single battered suitcase with the other, and surveyed the town of Stanford, Montana, with the critical eye of someone who'd learned not to expect much from the world. The platform was empty except for a tired-looking man loading freight and a stray dog nosing through trash. The town itself looked like it had been dropped onto the prairie by accident. A scattering of wooden buildings, a general store, a saloon, and not much else. She'd expected worse. A man approached from the end of the platform, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a coat that had seen better decades. His face was all hard angles, weather-beaten and closed off. He didn't smile. "Evelyn Hart? That's me. Caleb Mercer." He offered his hand. His grip was solid, impersonal. "Wagons this way." He took her suitcase without asking, which she appreciated, and led her to a wagon hitched to 2 draft horses. The bed was loaded with supplies, flour, salt, coils of rope, tools she didn't recognize. She climbed up without help. Caleb noticed but didn't comment. They rode in silence for the first mile. The town disappeared behind them, swallowed by the empty landscape. Evelyn studied the horizon, the way the grass moved in waves, the dark line of mountains to the west. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. "How far?" she asked. 10 miles. "You make this trip often?" "Once a month, sometimes less." She waited for him to elaborate. He didn't. "What should I expect?" she asked. Caleb glanced at her. "Cold, work, not much else. I didn't come here for comfort." "Good, because there isn't any." It wasn't said meanly, just factually. Evelyn appreciated that too. "How many men work the ranch?" she asked. 6, not counting me." "What do they think about you bringing a woman out here?" "Don't know, didn't ask." Evelyn almost smiled. "Fair enough." They lapsed into silence again. The wagon creaked, the horses plodded forward, and the wind never stopped. After a while, Caleb spoke without looking at her. "You ever been on a ranch before?" "No." "Ever ridden a horse?" "No." "Can you cook?" "Yes." "So?" "That's what I did in Helena." "Then you'll have plenty to keep you busy." "I intend to be useful," Evelyn said. Caleb shot her a look, quick, assessing. "We'll see." But the Mercer Ranch appeared slowly, rising out of the prairie like something stubborn that refused to quit. The main house was 2 stories, solid but plain, with a porch that wrapped around the front. Behind it stood the barn, corrals, bunkhouse, and several smaller outbuildings. Everything looked functional, built to last, but there was no softness anywhere. Caleb pulled the wagon up to the house. 3 men emerged from the barn, curious but cautious. Evelyn felt their eyes on her as she climbed down. "That's Dutch," Caleb said, nodding toward the oldest man. "My foreman, Wade, Miller, Carson. The others are out checking cattle." Dutch tipped his hat. "Ma'am." "Miss Hart," Evelyn said. Wade, a younger man with a cocky tilt to his jaw, looked her up and down with obvious skepticism. "You know what you signed up for out here?" "I know enough. Winter's coming, gets colder than you'd believe." "Then I'll dress warmer." Wade smirked but said nothing. Caleb grabbed her suitcase. "I'll show you the house." Inside, the house was clean but joyless. The furniture was heavy and practical, the walls bare except for a single faded photograph of an older couple Evelyn assumed were Caleb's parents. The kitchen was large, the stove cast iron and well-maintained. Upstairs, he showed her to a small bedroom with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the corrals. "It's not much," Caleb said. "It's fine." He set her suitcase down. "Supper's at 6. You don't have to cook tonight." "I'd like to." He looked at her, surprised. "You just got here." "And I'd like to start being useful." Caleb studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Suit yourself. Pantry's stocked. Feed 7 men plus yourself." "All right." He left her alone. Evelyn sat on the bed, looked around the plain little room, and felt something settle in her chest. It wasn't relief exactly, more like recognition. This place was exactly what she'd asked for, a future that didn't depend on charity. Now she just had to prove she could survive it. Dinner that first night was tense. The men ate in silence, shoveling down the venison stew and biscuits Evelyn had made without comment. She sat at the end of the long table, watching them, trying to read what they were thinking. Dutch finally broke the silence. "Stew's good." "Thank you," Wade grunted. "Better than Caleb's cooking, anyway." A couple of the men chuckled. Caleb didn't react. "Where you from originally?" Miller asked. He was younger than Dutch, quieter, with kind eyes. "Helena," Evelyn said. "Before that, Ohio." "Long way from home." "This is home now." Wade leaned back in his chair. "You really think you can handle ranch life?" "I guess we'll find out. Most women don't last a month out here." "I'm not most women." Wade smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We'll see about that." Caleb's voice cut through the tension. "She's here. That's the end of it." The table went quiet again. Evelyn met Caleb's gaze across the table and gave a small nod. He returned it, barely, then went back to eating. After supper, the men drifted back to the bunkhouse. Evelyn cleaned the kitchen alone, scrubbing dishes in silence while the wind rattled the windows. She'd just finished when Caleb appeared in the doorway. "You didn't have to do all that tonight," he said. I wanted to. He hesitated, like he wasn't sure what to say next. You need anything? No. All right. He turned to leave, then paused. The men. They're not used to having a woman around. Give them time. I'm not worried about the men. Caleb looked at her. What are you worried about? Evelyn dried her hands on a towel, considering the question. Failing. At what? This. All of it. He didn't tell her she wouldn't fail. He didn't offer empty reassurance. He just nodded, like he understood. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow starts early. What? Evelyn woke before dawn to the sound of men's voices outside. She dressed quickly, went downstairs, and found the kitchen empty. She started coffee, began mixing batter for flapjacks, and had breakfast half ready by the time Caleb came in from the barn. He stopped in the doorway, surprised. You're up early, he said. So are you. I'm always up early. Then so am I. Caleb poured himself coffee, watched her work. You don't have to do this every morning. Yes, I do. He didn't argue. The men filed in for breakfast, still half asleep, and ate without much conversation. Afterward, Caleb told Dutch to assign the day's work, then turned to Evelyn. Come with me. She followed him outside. The sun was just breaking over the horizon, painting the prairie golden red. He led her to the corrals where a dozen horses milled around, their breath steaming in the cold air. If you're going to live on a ranch, you need to ride, Caleb said. We'll start today. Evelyn looked at the horses, huge, powerful animals that could crush her without trying. Fear flickered through her, but she pushed it down. All right. Caleb brought out a gentle mare named Molly, saddled her with practiced ease, then stood back. Climb on. Evelyn approached the horse slowly. Molly watched her with dark, calm eyes. She put her foot in the stirrup, grabbed the saddle horn, and hauled herself up. It felt awkward, precarious, like balancing on a moving cliff. Sit up straight, Caleb said. Heels down. Don't grip with your knees. She tried to adjust, felt herself slipping, grabbed the horn tighter. Relax, Caleb said. The horse can feel your fear. I'm not afraid. Yes, you are. That's fine. Just breathe. He led Molly around the corral at a walk. Evelyn focused on staying upright, on not falling, on proving she could do this. After a few laps, Caleb let go of the lead rope. You're on your own. Panic spiked through her, but she didn't let it show. She nudged Molly forward with her heels like Caleb had shown her. The mare walked calmly, and Evelyn felt a tiny spark of confidence. Then Molly tossed her head, spooked by a blowing scrap of paper, and Evelyn lost her balance. She hit the ground hard. Pain exploded through her hip and shoulder. She lay there for a second, stunned, tasting dirt. Caleb appeared above her. You hurt? No. Can you stand? She pushed herself up, ignoring the screaming protest from her bruised body. I'm fine. Good. Get back on. Evelyn stared at him. Now? Right now. If you don't, you never will. She wanted to argue, wanted to say she needed a minute, needed to catch her breath, but she knew he was right. She climbed back on Molly. Caleb watched her settle into the saddle, then nodded. Again. For 2 weeks, Evelyn's life became a brutal rhythm of cooking, cleaning, and learning to ride. Every morning, she woke before the men, made breakfast, then spent an hour in the corral with Caleb while he taught her the basics of horsemanship. She fell often, sometimes hard enough to knock the wind out of her, but she always got back on. The men watched her with varying degrees of skepticism. Wade made snide comments whenever she stumbled or struggled. Dutch offered quiet encouragement. Miller and Carson mostly kept to themselves. But slowly, something shifted. Evelyn stopped falling as often. She learned to anticipate Molly's movements, to relax in the saddle, to trust herself. The house began to change too, small touches at first. She mended curtains, scrubbed floors until they shone, organized the chaotic pantry. She started keeping wildflowers on the table, baking bread fresh every other day, mending the men's worn shirts without being asked. The ranch house, which had felt like a cold shell, began to feel lived in. One evening after supper, Dutch lingered in the kitchen while Evelyn cleaned up. You're doing good, he said. Thank you. I mean it. Most women who come out here can't handle the isolation. You're tougher than you look. Evelyn smiled. I'll take that as a compliment. It is. He paused. Caleb's different since you arrived. Different how? Less closed off. He smiles sometimes. Not often, but sometimes. She glanced toward the door where Caleb had disappeared earlier. He's a hard man to read. He's been alone a long time. Makes a man forget how to be around people. Were there others before me? Dutch nodded slowly. 2. Both left within a month. Couldn't take the loneliness, the work, the winters. Caleb stopped expecting anyone to stay. I'm not leaving. I believe you. 3 weeks after Evelyn arrived, she was outside hanging laundry when she heard a commotion from the far corrals. Shouting, the crash of wood, a horse's furious scream. She dropped the sheet she was holding and ran toward the noise. A crowd of ranch hands had gathered around the largest corral. Inside, a massive black stallion was tearing the fence apart, slamming his body against the rails with terrifying force. His coat was slick with sweat, his eyes wild. What's happening? Evelyn asked. Wade, standing nearby, grinned meanly. Reaper's having one of his fits. Reaper? The devil horse. Caleb keeps him separated from the others because he'll kill anything that gets near him. She watched the stallion rage. Why keep him at all? Because he's the finest horse in Montana when he's not trying to murder you. Caleb's been trying to break him for 3 years. Every cowboy who's tried riding him ended up in the dirt, or worse. The stallion screamed again, a sound of pure fury. Caleb appeared, his face grim. He climbed into the corral slowly, a lead rope in his hands. Get back, Dutch warned the men. Caleb approached the stallion with careful, measured steps. Reaper watched him, muscles bunched, ready to strike. Easy, Caleb said softly. Easy, boy. The horse lunged. Caleb dodged, barely, and the stallion's teeth snapped shut inches from his arm. The men gasped. Caleb, get out of there, Dutch shouted, but Caleb didn't retreat. He stood his ground, speaking in that same low, steady voice. I'm not going to hurt you. You know that. Reaper circled him, snorting, looking for an opening. Evelyn couldn't breathe. She watched Caleb move with the horse, never turning his back, never showing fear. It was like watching 2 storms face off. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Reaper stopped circling. He stood there, sides heaving, staring at Caleb with something that looked almost like confusion. Caleb clipped the lead rope to the stallion's halter. The men exhaled collectively. Caleb led Reaper back to his isolated pen, secured the gate, then walked back toward the group. His shirt was torn, his face pale. Show's over, he said. Get back to work. The men scattered. Evelyn stayed. Caleb noticed her standing there. You should go inside. Is he always like that? Most days. Why keep him? Caleb looked back at the stallion, who was pacing his pen like a caged wolf. Because giving up on him would be easier, and I don't do easy. Has anyone ever ridden him? A few tried. All failed. One broke his collarbone, another cracked 3 ribs. Reaper doesn't want to be ridden. What does he want? Caleb turned to her, surprised by the question. I don't know, maybe nothing. Maybe to be left alone. Evelyn watched the black horse move, all power and rage and something underneath that looked painfully familiar. He's not trying to be mean, she said quietly. What? He's just terrified, and when you're terrified, you fight. Caleb studied her. You sound like you know the feeling. I do. They stood there in silence, watching the stallion, and something passed between them, an understanding neither of them could name. Stay away from him, Caleb said finally. Why? Because he's dangerous. So are a lot of things. Evelyn. Caleb's voice was firm. I'm serious. Don't go near that horse. She met his eyes. All right. But even as she said it, she knew she was lying. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Evelyn slipped outside. The ranch was silent except for the wind and the distant sound of cattle. She walked to Reaper's corral and stood at the fence. The stallion was a shadow in the darkness, but she could feel him watching her. I know what you are, she said softly. You're the thing everyone gave up on, the one they call impossible. Reaper snorted, moved closer. I was that too. Back in Helena. Back in Ohio before that. The girl nobody wanted, the one who wasn't pretty enough, or soft enough, or quiet enough. The horse stepped into the moonlight. His coat gleamed like polished stone. They told me I'd never survive out here, that I'd run back to town crying within a week. But I didn't, and you know why? Reaper's ears flicked forward. Because I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of letting people decide what I can and can't do. She reached through the fence, her hand extended. Reaper stared at her hand, then at her face. I'm not going to hurt you, Evelyn whispered. I promise. The stallion took one step forward, then another. His nose touched her palm. The contact lasted only a second before he jerked back, snorting. But it was enough. Evelyn smiled. Good boy. She stayed there until the cold drove her inside, and as she climbed the stairs to her room, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The next morning, Evelyn woke with bruises blooming across her ribs from yesterday's fall and a secret burning in her chest. She dressed quietly, went downstairs, and started breakfast like always. When Caleb came in from checking the early fence line, his boots caked with frost. He found her flipping flapjacks with the same steady rhythm she'd developed over the past month. You're limping, he said. I'm fine. You hit the ground hard yesterday. I've hit it harder. He poured coffee, studied her across the rim of his cup. You're stubborn. So are you. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Fair enough. The men filed in for breakfast, and the kitchen filled with the usual morning silence, broken only by scraping forks and Dutch's occasional grunt of approval. Wade sat at the far end, watching Evelyn with that same skeptical look he'd worn since she arrived. She ignored him. After breakfast, Caleb didn't lead her to the corral like usual. Instead, he nodded toward the barn. Different lesson today. She followed him inside. The barn smelled like hay and leather and horse sweat, a smell she'd grown to associate with this new life. Caleb grabbed 2 buckets and handed her one. Mucking stalls, he said. Not glamorous, but it's part of the work. I didn't come here for glamorous. Good. They worked side by side in silence. The physical labor felt good, honest, straightforward, something with a clear beginning and end. Evelyn shoveled manure and soiled straw, her muscles burning, sweat gathering at her temples despite the cold. After an hour, Caleb straightened up, wiping his forehead with his sleeve. You don't complain much, he said. What's there to complain about? Most people would find plenty. I'm not most people. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. No, you're not. They finished the stalls together. When they emerged from the barn, Dutch was waiting by the corral with a concerned look on his weathered face. We got a problem, he said. What kind? 3 heifers got through the fence on the east pasture. They're halfway to the Bridger place by now. Caleb swore under his breath. How'd they get through? Coyotes spooked them, probably. Fence was already weak from last week's wind. Round up Miller and Carson. We'll go bring them back. You want Wade too? Caleb hesitated. No. Have him start repairs on that fence. I don't want to lose any more. Dutch nodded and headed off. Caleb turned to Evelyn. This'll take most of the day. You'll be here alone. I can handle it. I know you can. He grabbed his saddle from the barn. Just stay out of trouble. She watched him ride off with the others, 4 men disappearing into the endless prairie, and then the ranch fell silent around her. Too silent. Evelyn stood there for a moment, listening to the wind, then turned and walked toward Reaper's corral. The black stallion was standing in the far corner, watching her approach with those dark, intelligent eyes. She stopped at the fence, keeping her distance. Remember me? She asked softly. Reaper's ears flicked forward. She'd brought an apple from the kitchen, hidden in her coat pocket. She pulled it out now, held it up so he could see. I'm not trying to trick you, just thought you might be hungry. The horse didn't move. Evelyn cut the apple in half with her pocket knife, ate 1 piece herself to show it was safe, then placed the other half on the top fence rail. It's there when you want it. She backed away slowly, giving him space. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Reaper took 1 cautious step forward, then another. He approached the fence like he was walking into a trap, every muscle tense and ready to bolt. When he reached the apple, he sniffed it thoroughly before finally taking it in his teeth. Evelyn smiled. Good boy. She stayed there for another 10 minutes, just standing quietly, letting him get used to her presence. When she finally turned to leave, she swore she heard him nicker softly, almost like he was asking her to stay. But she had work to do. The rest of the morning disappeared into chores. She scrubbed floors, mended a torn jacket she'd found in the bunkhouse, started a stew for dinner. Around noon, Wade came up to the house, tracking mud across the clean kitchen floor. Need some fence wire from the supply shed, he said without preamble. I don't know where that is. Course you don't, he smirked. Women don't usually concern themselves with ranch supplies. Then I'll learn. Wade leaned against the doorframe, looking her up and down in a way that made her skin crawl. You know, I had a bet going with Miller, said you wouldn't last 2 weeks. Looks like you lost. Jury's still out. Winter hasn't really hit yet. Wait till January when the snow's 6 feet deep and the temperature don't get above 0 for a month straight. That's when the pretty ones always crack. I'm not pretty. Didn't say you were. Evelyn met his eyes, refusing to look away. The wire's in the shed? Yeah. Then get it yourself. I've got stew to finish. She turned her back on him, a deliberate dismissal. For a second she thought he might say something cruel, push back harder. But he just laughed, a mean, thin sound, and left. When the kitchen door slammed behind him, Evelyn let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. She'd made an enemy. She knew that. But she'd also held her ground, and that mattered more. The men returned just before sunset, driving 3 annoyed heifers ahead of them. Caleb looked exhausted, his face wind-burned and tight with frustration. Took us 6 hours to find them, he said, dismounting heavily. Lost half a day's work. Fence is patched, Dutch reported. Wade finished it an hour ago. Good. Caleb handed Steady's reins to Carson. Get them fed and settled. I need to look at the books. He disappeared into the house. Evelyn served dinner at the usual time, but Caleb didn't come down. She saved him a plate, covered it, left it warming on the stove. Around 8, she climbed the stairs and knocked on his office door. Yeah. She opened it. Caleb was hunched over a desk covered in ledgers and papers, a lamp burning low beside him. He looked up, surprised to see her. Dinner's ready, she said. You didn't eat. Not hungry? You should eat anyway. Evelyn, I'll bring it up. She didn't wait for him to argue. She went back downstairs, got the plate, carried it up with a cup of coffee. When she returned, Caleb was staring at the ledgers like they'd personally insulted him. She set the plate down. What's wrong? Nothing. You're lying. He looked at her sharply, then sighed. Numbers don't lie. We're short. Short on what? Money. Feed costs went up this year. Lost 20 head to wolves last spring. The market price for beef is down. We'll make it through winter, but barely. What happens if you don't? I sell off part of the herd, or the land, or both. He rubbed his eyes. 20 years building this place, and one bad season could tear it down. Evelyn pulled up a chair, sat down across from him. Can I help? Unless you've got $3,000 hidden in that suitcase, no. I'm serious. Caleb looked at her, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she saw something raw in his face. Vulnerability, fear. You can't fix this, he said quietly. Maybe not, but you don't have to carry it alone. They sat there in silence, the lamplight throwing shadows across the walls. Finally, Caleb picked up his fork and started eating. Evelyn watched him, then stood to leave. Evelyn, she paused at the door. Thank you. She nodded and left him to his numbers. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in her narrow bed listening to the wind rattle her window and thinking about the ranch, about Caleb, about the weight of trying to hold something together when the world kept trying to tear it apart. She understood that weight better than he knew. Around midnight, she gave up on sleep, pulled on her coat, and went outside. The cold bit into her immediately, but she didn't care. She walked to Reaper's corral like she was being pulled by a rope. The stallion was awake, standing in the moonlight like a ghost. Can't sleep either? She asked. Reaper watched her approach. This time, he didn't back away. Evelyn climbed onto the bottom rail of the fence, balancing carefully. You know what I think? I think you're not mean at all. I think you're just scared. Someone hurt you once, and you decided never to let anyone close enough to do it again. The horse took a step closer. I get it. I really do. I spent my whole life being told I wasn't good enough, not pretty enough, not soft enough, not quiet enough. So I stopped trying to be what they wanted, started being what I needed instead. She reached through the fence again, slower this time. Reaper's nose touched her palm, and she felt the warm huff of his breath. But being strong all the time gets exhausting, doesn't it? Sometimes you just want someone to see you, really see you. Reaper stayed there, letting her touch him. Evelyn felt something crack open in her chest, something she'd kept locked up tight for years. "We're the same, you and me," she whispered, "the things everyone gave up on." She stayed until her fingers went numb from the cold, then climbed down and headed back to the house. As she reached the porch, she glanced back and saw Reaper still watching her from across the darkness. The next week fell into a new rhythm. Mornings, she worked with Caleb. Riding now came easier, her body learning the language of the horse beneath her. Afternoons, she managed the house, cooked, mended, kept things running. Evenings, after everyone else had gone to sleep, she visited Reaper. Each night, the stallion let her get a little closer. She brought him apples, carrots, anything she could spare from the kitchen. She talked to him about everything and nothing, her life in Helena, the customers who'd looked through her like she was invisible, the fear that had chased her west. And slowly, impossibly, Reaper began to trust her. One evening, Dutch caught her coming back from the corral. "You're spending time with that devil horse," he said. It wasn't a question. Evelyn didn't deny it. "Yes." "Caleb, no." "No?" Dutch studied her in the darkness. "He told you to stay away." "I know what he told me. That horse has hurt people, Miss Hart, good men who knew what they were doing. I'm not trying to break him. I'm just trying to be his friend. Horses like that don't have friends. They have victims." "Then I'll be the first one who isn't." Dutch shook his head slowly. "You're either the bravest woman I ever met or the most foolish. Maybe both." He almost smiled at that. "Just be careful. Caleb's already lost enough without losing you too." The words hung in the cold air between them. Evelyn wanted to ask what he meant. Who else had Caleb lost? But Dutch had already turned away, heading toward the bunkhouse. She stood there alone, watching her breath cloud in the freezing air, and wondered what ghosts haunted this ranch besides the living. The following Saturday, Caleb announced they were going into town for supplies. He asked if Evelyn wanted to come. "I could use some fabric," she said, "for curtains." Wade, who was leaning against the barn, snorted. "Curtains, that's real ranch work right there." Evelyn ignored him. She'd gotten good at that. The ride to Stanford took 2 hours. Caleb drove the wagon in his usual silence while Evelyn watched the landscape roll past. After a while, he spoke. "You've been here almost 6 weeks." "I have." "How are you finding it?" "Harder than I expected. Better than I hoped." He glanced at her. "That mean you're staying?" "Did you think I wouldn't?" I didn't know what to think. Most women take one look at this life and run. "I'm not running." "No," Caleb said quietly. "You're not." They reached Stanford around noon. The town looked exactly the same as the day she'd arrived. Small, dusty, barely clinging to existence. Caleb parked the wagon outside the general store. "I'll get the feed and supplies. You get whatever you need for the house." Inside, the store smelled like coffee and wood polish. An older woman behind the counter looked up as Evelyn entered. "You must be the new bride at the Mercer place." "I'm Evelyn Hart, Martha Gibbons. I run this store with my husband." She looked Evelyn up and down with frank curiosity. "How are you finding ranch life?" "It suits me." "Does it now? Most city women can't handle the isolation." "I'm not most city women," Martha smiled. "I'm starting to see that. What can I help you with?" "Fabric. For curtains. Something sturdy. I've got some heavy cotton that might work. Not fancy, but it'll last." She showed Evelyn several bolts of fabric. Evelyn chose a simple blue cotton, paid for it with money she'd earned sewing in Helena, money she'd kept hidden in case she needed to run. But she wasn't running, not anymore. As she was leaving, Martha called after her. "Mrs. Hart?" "It's Miss Hart, then. Word of advice, if you want to survive out here, don't try to change everything at once. The land breaks people who fight it. You've got to bend with it." "I'll keep that in mind." Outside, she found Caleb loading the wagon. He saw her fabric and raised an eyebrow. "Blue? You don't like blue?" I don't care about curtains one way or the other. Well, you're getting them anyway. He actually smiled at that, a real smile that transformed his whole face. Yes, ma'am. They were halfway home when they saw smoke rising in the distance. Caleb's face went pale. That's coming from the ranch. He snapped the reins hard. The horses broke into a run, the wagon bouncing violently over the rough ground. Evelyn held on, her heart hammering, watching the black smoke grow thicker. Please don't be the house, she thought. Please don't be the barn. As they crested the final hill, Caleb swore viciously. The bunkhouse was on fire. Men were running everywhere, hauling water from the well, trying to beat back flames that were already consuming the roof. Dutch was shouting orders, organizing a bucket line. Wade stood off to the side, his face covered in soot. Caleb leapt from the wagon before it even stopped. What happened? Stovepipe, Dutch yelled back. We tried to catch it early, but it spread too fast. Anyone hurt? Miller burned his hand pretty bad. Otherwise, we're clear. Did you get everything out? Most of it. Lost some bedding, couple personal items. Caleb grabbed a bucket, joined the line. Evelyn jumped down, ran to help. The heat was intense, the smoke choking. They worked for over an hour, pouring water on flames that didn't want to die. By the time they got it under control, the bunkhouse was a smoking ruin. The men stood around it, exhausted and silent. Everything they'd owned had been inside that building, clothes, boots, keepsakes from home. Now it was ash. Dutch broke the silence first. Well, that's a problem. Where are they supposed to sleep? Wade demanded. Caleb stared at the wreckage, his jaw tight. We'll figure something out. Figure what out? We can't rebuild before winter, and 6 men can't share what's left of the barn. The reality of it settled over everyone like the smoke still drifting in the air. Winter was weeks away. The bunkhouse was destroyed, and they had nowhere to put the men. Evelyn spoke before she could think better of it. They can use the house. Everyone turned to stare at her. What? Caleb said. The house is big enough. There are extra rooms upstairs. They can sleep there until the bunkhouse is rebuilt. Wade laughed harshly. You want 6 men living in your house? It's not my house. It's the ranch's house. And the ranch needs its workers alive, not frozen to death. Caleb looked at her like she'd grown a second head. Evelyn, you don't have to. I know I don't have to, but it makes sense, doesn't it? Unless you have a better idea. He didn't. None of them did. Dutch cleared his throat. It's generous of you, Miss Hart, but are you sure? I'm sure. It won't be proper, Wade said with a sneer. Unmarried woman sharing a house with a bunch of men. Evelyn met his eyes. Then I guess people will talk. They can talk all they want. I'll still be warm, and so will you. Caleb ran a hand through his hair, looked at the destroyed bunkhouse, then back at Evelyn. All right, but only until we can rebuild. First warm spell we get, we start construction. Agreed. That night, 6 exhausted men moved their salvaged belongings into the upstairs rooms of the ranch house. Evelyn gave them the spare bedrooms, set up makeshift cots in the hallway for overflow. The house that had felt empty for so long suddenly overflowed with noise and life. It was chaos. Boot prints appeared on her clean floors. The bathroom was constantly occupied. Someone left a wet saddle on the kitchen table. Evelyn wanted to scream, but she kept her mouth shut and cleaned up after them. Because this was what survival looked like. Messy, imperfect, loud. That night she lay in bed listening to men snoring through the walls and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. 3 days later, the first real snow came. It started as a few flakes drifting down around noon, pretty and harmless. By evening, it was a full blizzard. Wind screamed around the house, shaking windows and piling snow against the doors. The temperature dropped so fast that water left in buckets froze solid within an hour. Caleb spent the day moving cattle to sheltered areas, making sure the horses were secure, battening down everything that could blow away. When he finally came inside after dark, his lips were blue and he couldn't stop shaking. Evelyn sat him by the stove, wrapped him in blankets, forced hot coffee into his hands. You're freezing, she said. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're half dead. The cattle are fine. You need to warm up before you lose fingers. He didn't argue, which told her how bad it really was. She heated water, made him soak his hands and feet, watched the color slowly return to his skin. The other men huddled in the main room, the house feeling suddenly small with all of them crammed inside. The wind howled outside like something alive and angry. First real storm of the season, Dutch said. Always hits hardest. How long will it last? Evelyn asked. Could be a day. Could be 3. Hard to say. Miller, whose hand was bandaged from the fire, looked worried. The cattle. We'll make it or they won't, Caleb said flatly. Nothing we can do about it now. They ate dinner together, all of them crowded around the table that wasn't built for this many people. Afterward, Dutch pulled out a deck of cards and started a poker game. Wade dealt. Carson and Miller joined in. Evelyn cleaned up, then sat by the fire with her sewing. Caleb sat across from her, staring into the flames. You should have said no, he said quietly. To what? Letting them into the house. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Why? She looked up from her stitching. Because this is what family does. You take care of each other. We're not family. Aren't we? He didn't answer that, just watched her sew, the firelight dancing across her face, and something in his expression shifted. The storm lasted 2 days. When it finally broke, the world outside was buried under 3 feet of snow. The men dug paths to the barn, the corrals, the well. They checked the cattle, found most had survived by huddling together in the lee of the hills, but 5 heifers had frozen to death. Caleb took the loss hard. Evelyn found him in the barn that evening, standing alone in the shadows. I'm sorry, she said. It's part of ranching. Animals die. That doesn't make it easier. He turned to face her. No, it doesn't. They stood there in the quiet barn, the smell of hay and horses surrounding them, and Evelyn realized how much she'd come to care about this hard, closed-off man who carried the weight of the ranch like it was his personal cross to bear. Caleb, she said softly. Yeah? You're doing the best you can. You know that, right? He looked at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he reached out and touched her cheek, just a brief brush of his rough fingers against her skin. So are you. Then he was gone, walking out into the snow, leaving Evelyn standing there with her heart beating too fast and her face burning where he'd touched her. She stood there long after he left, trying to understand what had just happened, trying to calm the storm inside her chest that had nothing to do with the weather. That touch haunted Evelyn for days afterward. She'd catch herself in the middle of kneading bread or mending shirts, her fingers frozen mid-motion, her mind replaying that brief contact, the rough warmth of Caleb's hand against her cheek, the way he'd looked at her like he was seeing something he hadn't expected to find. She tried to shake it off, told herself it meant nothing, but her body knew she was lying. The ranch settled into an uneasy winter routine. The men living in the house created constant friction, not hostile, exactly, but uncomfortable. Wade tracked mud through the kitchen daily despite her repeated requests that he remove his boots. Miller left his wet socks hanging over chairs. Carson snored so loud the whole house shook. But Dutch tried. He organized the others, enforced basic cleanliness rules, made sure they respected Evelyn's space, and slowly, grudgingly, the chaos began to take shape into something almost livable. Caleb started taking his evening meals alone in his office again, avoiding the crowded dinner table. Evelyn noticed but didn't push. She understood the need for solitude, for quiet in a world that had suddenly become too loud. Instead, she focused on what she could control. She continued her midnight visits to Reaper's Corral, and the Black Stallion's trust grew with each passing night. He now came to the fence when he saw her approaching, nickering softly in greeting. She could touch his neck, run her hands along his powerful shoulders, feel the tension slowly draining from his body. One night, she brought a saddle blanket. Reaper eyed it suspiciously. Just want you to get used to the weight, Evelyn murmured. No saddle, no bridle, just this. She draped it carefully across his back. The stallion tensed, ready to explode, but she kept her hand on his neck, her voice low and steady. Easy. You're all right. I'm not going to hurt you. Reaper stood there, every muscle coiled tight, breathing hard. But he didn't buck, didn't rear, just stood there shaking while Evelyn praised him quietly. After 5 minutes, she removed the blanket. Good boy. Such a good boy. She was so focused on Reaper that she didn't hear the footsteps behind her until Wade's voice cut through the darkness. What the hell are you doing? Evelyn spun around. Wade stood 10 feet away, his face shadowed but his posture aggressive. None of your business, she said. Caleb told you to stay away from that horse. Caleb's not here. Wade moved closer. You think you're special because you can pet a mean horse? You think that makes you better than the rest of us? I don't think I'm better than anyone. You sure act like it. Coming out here playing with an animal that's put 3 men in the hospital. You're going to get yourself killed, and then what? We all get blamed for not stopping you? Nobody asked you to watch over me? Yeah, well, maybe somebody should. You're reckless. Evelyn stepped away from the corral, putting distance between herself and Reaper. I know what I'm doing. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you look like a stubborn woman trying to prove something that doesn't need proving. And you look like a man who can't stand the idea that a woman might be capable of something he's not. Wade's face darkened. You don't know anything about me. I know you've been trying to make me fail since the day I arrived. I know you resent me for being here. I know you're angry about something that has nothing to do with me. You're right about that last part. Then take it up with whatever's actually bothering you and leave me alone. She tried to walk past him, but Wade grabbed her arm. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop her. Let go, Evelyn said quietly. Not until you listen. That horse is dangerous. You might think you've got some special connection with him, but one wrong move and he'll kill you. And I don't care how tough you think you are, you're not tougher than 1,000 pounds of pure rage. Let go of my arm. Why? What are you going to do about it? She doesn't have to do anything about it. Caleb's voice came out of the darkness like a gunshot. Wade dropped Evelyn's arm and stepped back. Caleb emerged from the shadows near the barn, his face carved from stone. Get back to the house, he told Wade. I was just... now. Wade shot Evelyn a look that promised this wasn't over, then stalked away. Evelyn stood there, her heart pounding as Caleb approached. You all right? He asked. I'm fine. He hurt you? No. Caleb looked toward Reaper's corral, then back at her. How long have you been coming out here? Evelyn's stomach dropped. A while. How long is a while? Since the first week. His jaw tightened. I told you to stay away from him. I know what you told me. Then why didn't you listen? Because he needed someone to see him as more than just a dangerous animal. He is a dangerous animal, Evelyn. He's put grown men in the hospital. Because they tried to break him. I'm not trying to break him. What are you trying to do? She met his eyes. Be his friend. Caleb stared at her like she'd lost her mind. You can't be friends with a horse like that. Why not? Because friendship requires trust, and that animal doesn't trust anyone. He trusts me. For now. Until he doesn't. And then what? Evelyn crossed her arms. Are we talking about the horse or about you? The question hung between them like smoke. Caleb's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across his face before he locked it down again. Go back to the house, he said. Caleb, that's not a request. She wanted to argue, wanted to make him understand. But she could see the wall going up behind his eyes, the same wall he'd built around everything that mattered to him. So she walked away, leaving him standing alone in the cold. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Evelyn lay awake listening to the men snoring through the walls and replaying the confrontation with Wade, with Caleb. When dawn finally broke, she was already dressed and in the kitchen, her hands moving through the familiar routine of breakfast preparation like a prayer. Caleb came down early, before the others. He poured coffee, stood by the window, watching the sun come up. I'm not stopping, Evelyn said. He didn't turn around. I figured. I'm careful. I promise you that. Being careful doesn't always matter. Nothing in life is safe, Caleb. You could get thrown from steady tomorrow. Dutch could break his leg on ice. The barn could catch fire. We can't live our lives afraid of what might go wrong. I'm not afraid. Yes, you are. He turned then, his eyes sharp. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? You keep everyone at arm's length. You work yourself half to death to avoid feeling anything. You built this whole ranch into something remarkable, but you're terrified of actually caring about any of it, because caring means you could lose it. You've been here 2 months. Don't pretend you understand my life. Then help me understand it. They stood there, the morning light spilling across the kitchen floor between them, and for a moment Evelyn thought he might actually open up, might actually let her in. But then Dutch's heavy footsteps sounded on the stairs, and Caleb's face closed like a door slamming shut. Breakfast smells good, Dutch said, entering the kitchen. Evelyn forced a smile. It'll be ready in 10 minutes. The rest of the men filtered down, and the moment was lost. Over the following week, tension spread through the house like a cold draft. Wade barely spoke to Evelyn, but his resentment radiated off him whenever they were in the same room. Caleb worked longer hours, coming in after dark, leaving before dawn. The easy rhythm they'd developed over the past months fractured into something jagged and uncomfortable. Only Reaper remained constant. Every night, Evelyn slipped out to his corral. Every night, the stallion greeted her with growing affection. She'd progressed from the blanket to actually placing a saddle on his back. No cinch, just the weight of it. He tolerated it now, standing still while she praised him. "You're doing so well," she whispered one night, her hand on his neck. "Better than anyone thought possible." The horse nuzzled her shoulder, and Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes. This wild, broken creature trusted her. Why couldn't the people in her life do the same? She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the figure approaching until Dutch cleared his throat. "He lets you saddle him now," Dutch said. Not a question. Evelyn turned. "He does. I've been watching you. These past weeks. You've got a gift." "I don't know about that." "I do. I've worked with horses my whole life, and I've never seen anyone gentle a mean one like you're doing. No force, no fear, just patience." "He's not mean. He's just scared." Dutch studied Reaper thoughtfully. "Maybe. But scared animals are still dangerous. So are scared people." "True enough." He paused. "Caleb know how far you've gotten with him?" "No." "You planning to tell him?" "Eventually." "Word of advice? Tell him before he finds out another way. Man doesn't like surprises." "Caleb doesn't like anything." Dutch smiled faintly. "That's not true. He likes you, whether he knows it or not." Evelyn's heart did something complicated in her chest. He has a strange way of showing it. He's been alone a long time. Makes a man forget how to be around someone he cares about. What happened to him? Why is he so closed off? Dutch was quiet for a long moment. "That's his story to tell, not mine. But I will say this. You're the first person I've seen crack that armor in years. Don't give up on him yet." He walked away, leaving Evelyn alone with the horse and her tangled thoughts. The next morning brought news that scattered her plans like birds startled from a tree. A rider came at dawn, one of the Bridger ranch hands, with a message that old Tom Bridger had died in his sleep. The funeral would be held in 2 days, and everyone in the basin was expected to attend. Caleb received the news stone-faced. He was a good man, fair neighbor. "Did you know him well?" Evelyn asked. "Well enough. He helped me when I was first starting out. Lent me breeding stock when I couldn't afford my own." It was the most Caleb had said about his past since she'd arrived. Evelyn wanted to ask more, but the moment his foreman started discussing logistics for the trip to town. "We'll take the wagon," Caleb decided. "Leave at dawn, day after tomorrow. Everyone who can be spared should go." "That include me?" Wade asked with barely concealed hostility. "Yes. And her?" Wade jerked his chin toward Evelyn. Caleb's voice went cold. "Her name is Evelyn. Use it." Wade's face flushed, but he nodded. That evening, Evelyn pulled her only good dress from her trunk, a simple gray wool she'd made herself years ago. It was worn, but clean. She laid it out on her bed, trying to remember the last time she'd attended a funeral. Her mother's, maybe. 7 years ago now. A knock at her door startled her. "Come in." Caleb entered, looking uncomfortable in the doorway of her bedroom. "Got a minute?" "Of course." He stepped inside, hands shoved in his pockets. "About the funeral. You don't have to come if you don't want to." "Why wouldn't I?" "You didn't know Bridger, and people in town, they talk." "Let them talk." "It'll be uncomfortable. Questions about us, about why you're here. Not everyone understands arrangements like ours." Evelyn studied his face. "Are you ashamed of me?" "What?" "No." "Then I'm coming." "Evelyn, I'm part of this ranch now, Caleb. That means I stand with you when it matters. Tom Bridger was your neighbor, your friend. I should pay my respects." He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his eyes. "All right." He started to leave, then paused. "That dress you've got laid out, it's fine, but if you want something warmer, there's a trunk in the attic. My mother's things. She was about your size." "I couldn't." "She's been gone 10 years. The clothes are just sitting up there gathering dust." Might as well be useful. He left before she could respond. Evelyn stood there, holding the gray dress, feeling the weight of what he'd just offered. An invitation into his past. A piece of his history. She found the trunk an hour later, buried under old furniture and forgotten tools. Inside were dresses from another era, beautifully made, carefully preserved. She pulled out a dark blue wool dress with black trim, simple but elegant. It fit almost perfectly. As she stood in front of the small mirror, smoothing the fabric, Evelyn felt like she was wearing someone else's life. Someone who'd belonged here. Someone who'd mattered. She wondered what had happened to Caleb's mother. How she'd died. Why this house felt so haunted by absence. The funeral took place on a gray Thursday that threatened snow. The entire basin seemed to have turned out. Ranchers and their families, townsfolk, even people who'd traveled from miles away. Tom Bridger had been well loved. Evelyn sat in the church pew beside Caleb, acutely aware of the stares, the whispered conversations behind raised hands. She kept her back straight, her face composed, refusing to give them anything to whisper about. The service was simple, heartfelt. Tom's son gave a eulogy that made several people cry. Hymns were sung, prayers were offered. Afterward, at the graveside, Caleb stood with his hat in his hands, watching the coffin being lowered into the frozen ground. Evelyn stayed close, a silent presence. "He taught me how to read the weather," Caleb said quietly. "Said the sky would tell you everything if you knew how to listen." "He sounds like he was a good teacher." "He was. Better than I deserved." Before Evelyn could ask what he meant, someone approached. A woman in her 40s, dressed in elegant mourning clothes, with sharp eyes that cataloged everything. "Caleb Mercer. It's been years." Caleb's whole body tensed. "Margaret? I heard you'd taken in a woman. I had to see for myself." Margaret turned her calculating gaze on Evelyn. "You must be the seamstress from Helena." "Evelyn Hart. Margaret Patterson. I run the millinery shop in town." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Tell me, Miss Hart, how are you finding frontier life?" "It suits me." "Does it? Most women find it terribly isolating. Why, Caleb's first arrangement barely lasted 3 weeks before she ran back to civilization." "I'm not running anywhere." "We'll see. Winter has a way of testing even the strongest constitutions." Margaret turned back to Caleb. "Your ranch doing well?" "Well enough. I heard you lost cattle in the early snow, and that fire at your bunkhouse. Such terrible luck." "News travels fast." "It's a small basin, Caleb. Everyone knows everyone's business." She paused meaningfully. "Some more than others." Caleb's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Margaret smiled again, touched Evelyn's arm with false warmth, and drifted away. "Who was that?" Evelyn asked. "No one important." "She seemed to know you pretty well." "She knew my mother. Thinks that gives her the right to meddle." They didn't speak of it again, but Evelyn felt the woman's words like splinters under her skin. Caleb's first arrangement barely lasted 3 weeks. How many had there been? How many women had come to this ranch full of hope and left broken? The ride home was silent except for the wagon wheels and the wind. The other men had stayed in town, taking advantage of the rare trip to civilization. It was just Caleb and Evelyn on the frozen road. "Thank you for coming today," Caleb said finally. "I wanted to. Margaret's right about one thing. People are talking. Let them." "It bothers you?" Evelyn considered lying, then decided against it. "A little, but I'm used to people talking about me." "What did they say, back in Helena? That I was too plain to catch a husband, too stubborn to keep one if I did, that I'd end up alone making dresses for other women's weddings until I died." "They were wrong." "Were they?" "I'm still alone." Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop. They were miles from anywhere, nothing but snow and sky in every direction. He turned to face her. "You're not alone," he said. "Aren't I?" "No." The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Evelyn's breath caught. "Caleb, I'm not good at this, talking, feeling, any of it, but you should know—" He stopped, struggling. "You matter. To this ranch. To me." It wasn't a declaration of love, wasn't even close. But from a man like Caleb Mercer, it might as well have been. "You matter to me too," Evelyn said softly. Something shifted in his face. He reached out, touched her cheek again like he had weeks ago in the barn. This time his hand lingered. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. Do what? Care about someone. Let someone in. I'm out of practice. Then we'll figure it out together. He leaned closer, and Evelyn's heart hammered so hard she was sure he could hear it. For one suspended moment, she thought he might kiss her. Then he pulled back, cleared his throat, picked up the reins. We should get home before dark. Evelyn wanted to scream, wanted to grab him by the collar and demand he stop running from whatever this was building between them. But she just nodded and settled back into her seat. Some battles couldn't be won by force, only patience. They reached the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the snow gold and pink. The house looked warm and welcoming with lamplight in the windows. For the first time since she'd arrived, Evelyn looked at it and thought, home. That night she went to Reaper's corral earlier than usual. The stallion nickered when he saw her, trotting over like an eager dog. "Hey, beautiful boy," she murmured, stroking his neck. "I had a complicated day. Want to hear about it?" Reaper huffed into her hair, warm breath in the cold air. "I think Caleb might care about me. Actually care about me. But he's so scared of feeling anything that he can't admit it, and I don't know how to help him." The horse nuzzled her shoulder. "You understand, don't you? Being so hurt that you can't let anyone close. Building walls so high that you forget what it's like to be touched without fear." She ran her hands along Reaper's powerful neck, feeling the muscle and strength beneath the sleek coat. "But you're learning. You let me in. Maybe he will too." A sound behind her made her turn. Wade stood at the edge of the corral, and even in the darkness she could see the anger radiating off him. "You're unbelievable," he said. "Go away, Wade. You think you're so special, think you can do whatever you want because Caleb's too blind to see what you're really doing." "What am I doing?" "Manipulating him, using him. You've got him so twisted up he can't think straight." Evelyn stepped away from Reaper, her patience finally snapping. "You don't know anything about me or what I feel for Caleb. I know you're playing a game. I know you're trying to make yourself indispensable so he'll keep you around. And this?" He gestured at Reaper. "This is just another way to make yourself look special." "You're wrong." "Am I?" "Tell me something, Evelyn. What happens when winter really hits and you realize this life isn't some romantic adventure? What happens when you get bored or scared or tired of pretending to be tough? You'll leave, just like all the others, and Caleb will be left picking up the pieces." "I'm not leaving. Everyone leaves. It's just a matter of time." He walked away before she could respond. Evelyn stood there shaking, partly from anger, partly from the cold truth buried in his words. What if he was right? What if she couldn't handle this life long term? What if she was just fooling herself? Reaper nudged her hand, pulling her from the spiral of doubt. She looked at the horse, this beautiful, broken creature who'd learned to trust again despite everything. "No," she said out loud. "I'm not leaving. I'm staying right here." She just had to prove it, to Wade, to Caleb, to herself. The following week brought weather so brutal that leaving the house became a calculated risk. Temperatures dropped to 20 below zero. Wind screamed across the prairie like something unleashed from hell. The men rotated shifts, checking on cattle and horses, coming back inside with ice in their beards and fear in their eyes. 2 more heifers died. A section of the barn roof collapsed under the weight of snow. A pipe froze and burst, flooding part of the cellar. Caleb aged 10 years and 10 days. Evelyn watched him shoulder each new disaster with grim determination, refusing help, refusing rest. He stopped eating properly, stopped sleeping, just worked until exhaustion forced him to his knees, then dragged himself up and worked some more. On the 8th night of the cold snap, she found him in the barn at midnight, repairing the roof section by lamplight. "Caleb, come inside." "Almost done." "You're going to freeze to death." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're half dead on your feet." He hammered another board into place, his hands shaking from cold and fatigue. "Ranch doesn't care if I'm tired." "I care." "Evelyn, please just come inside. The roof can wait until morning." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in him crumbled. "I can't lose this place. It's all I have." "No, it's not." "Yes, it is. This ranch is everything, my whole life. If I lose it, you have people who care about you. You have Dutch and Miller and Carson. You have me." "For how long?" "Everyone leaves eventually." There it was, the raw wound at the center of everything. Evelyn stepped closer, ignoring the cold, the late hour, the impropriety of being alone with him in the dark barn. "I'm not leaving, Caleb. I know you don't believe me. I know you're waiting for me to prove Wade right and run back to civilization. But I'm staying, through winter, through drought, through whatever hell this land throws at us. I'm staying." "Why?" His voice broke on the word. "Why would you stay here? In this brutal place with a man who doesn't know how to be anything but hard and closed off? Because this brutal place feels more like home than anywhere I've ever been. Because that hard, closed-off man is the first person who ever saw me as more than just hands to sew or a burden to carry. Because I'm tired of running from things that scare me." They stood inches apart, breath clouding in the freezing air. "I'm scared too," Caleb admitted, "of caring about you, of needing you, of what happens when I let you in and you realize I'm not worth staying for." "You're worth everything," Evelyn said fiercely. "You just can't see it." He kissed her then, desperate and clumsy and perfect. His cold lips, his rough hands cradling her face, the way he kissed her like she was the only warm thing in a frozen world. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Caleb pressed his forehead to hers. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered. "Neither do I. We'll figure it out together." They stood there holding each other while the lamplight flickered and the wind howled and the ranch creaked around them like a ship in a storm. And for the first time since either of them could remember, they weren't alone. They walked back to the house together through the brutal cold, not touching but somehow closer than they'd ever been. The kitchen was dark when they entered, the rest of the house silent. Caleb lit a lamp, and in the soft glow, Evelyn could see the exhaustion carved into every line of his face. "You need to eat something," she said. "I need to sleep." Food first, then sleep. She expected him to argue, but he just nodded and sat at the table while she reheated leftover stew. They ate in comfortable silence, and when Caleb finally pushed back his empty bowl, some of the tension had left his shoulders. "Thank you," he said. "For feeding you?" "For staying." Evelyn reached across the table, covered his rough hand with hers. "Where else would I go?" He turned his hand over, laced his fingers through hers. They sat like that for a long moment, the house settling around them, before Caleb finally stood. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow won't be any easier." But something had shifted between them. The air felt different, charged with possibility. As Evelyn climbed the stairs to her room, she caught Caleb watching her from the bottom step, his expression unguarded for once. She slept better that night than she had in weeks. The cold snap broke 3 days later, temperatures climbing just enough to make outdoor work bearable again. The men threw themselves into repairs, the barn roof, the burst pipe, a dozen other problems the weather had created. The ranch felt like a battlefield after a siege, battered but still standing. Evelyn used the slightly warmer weather to sneak more time with Reaper. The stallion had progressed remarkably. She could now saddle him fully, cinch the girth, even slip a bridle over his head. He still tensed at each new step, but he trusted her enough not to fight. She knew she was playing with fire, knew that Caleb would be furious if he discovered how far she'd taken this. But some part of her needed to see it through, needed to prove that broken things could heal if given enough patience and care. One afternoon, while the men were occupied with fence repairs on the far pasture, Evelyn made a decision that would change everything. She was going to ride Reaper. Her hands shook as she saddled him, her heart hammering against her ribs. The stallion stood calmly, but she could feel the coiled energy in his muscles, the potential for violence that lurked just beneath the surface. "We can do this," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "We can do this together." She led him to the center of the corral, checked the cinch one more time, then put her foot in the stirrup. Reaper's whole body went rigid. Evelyn paused, her weight balanced between earth and horse. "Easy, boy. It's just me. Just me." She swung her leg over slowly, settling into the saddle with infinite care. For one breathless moment, nothing happened. Reaper stood frozen, every muscle locked. Then he exploded. The stallion bucked with terrifying violence, his back arching like a bow, all 4 hooves leaving the ground. Evelyn grabbed the saddle horn, her teeth rattling, her whole body jolted by the force of his rage. He spun, bucked again, nearly vertical. She lost her left stirrup, felt herself sliding, and pure instinct made her clamp her legs tight and hold on. "Easy," she gasped. "Reaper, easy." but the horse was beyond hearing. He was a storm trying to shake itself apart, bucking and spinning with mindless fury. Evelyn's world became a blur of motion and terror. Every muscle in her body screamed. Her grip on the horn was the only thing keeping her in the saddle. She didn't know how long it lasted. 30 seconds, a minute, an eternity. But somewhere in the chaos, something shifted. Instead of fighting Reaper's movements, Evelyn stopped resisting. She released the horn, lowered herself deeper into the saddle, and moved with him instead of against him. The change was subtle but immediate. Reaper's bucks became less violent, more confused. He spun once more, then stopped, sides heaving, sweat darkening his coat. Evelyn sat frozen on his back, barely breathing. The stallion's ears swiveled back toward her, listening. "Good boy," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Such a good boy." She sat there for another minute, just letting him feel her weight, her presence. When she finally dismounted, her legs almost gave out. She had to grab the fence to stay upright. Reaper turned to look at her, and something in his dark eyes had changed. Recognition, maybe. Or respect. Evelyn leaned against the fence, shaking from adrenaline and relief and triumph. She'd done it. The impossible thing everyone said couldn't be done. She'd ridden Reaper. "What the hell was that?" Wade's voice shattered the moment. Evelyn spun around to find him standing at the corral gate, his face twisted with disbelief and rage. "You just rode that horse." "Yes." "You could have died." "But I didn't." Wade climbed over the fence, stalking toward her. "You have any idea what you just did? That horse has put 3 men in the hospital, 3 trained cowboys who knew what they were doing, and you, a seamstress who's been riding for 2 months, just climbed on his back like it was nothing?" "It wasn't nothing. It was terrifying." "Then why'd you do it?" "Because someone had to show him that not everyone wants to hurt him." Wade laughed bitterly. "You think you're special. You think you've got some magical touch that makes you better than the rest of us." "I don't think I'm better than anyone." "Yes, you do. You've thought it since the day you arrived. The tough city girl who can handle ranch life. The woman who can tame the devil horse. Well, let me tell you something. You got lucky. That horse could have killed you, and then where would we be? Explaining to the sheriff how we let a woman get herself trampled because she was too stubborn to listen? Nobody let me do anything. This was my choice. Your choice affects all of us. You die out here. We all pay the price. I'm not going to die. You don't know that." Wade moved closer, his anger palpable. "You're reckless, Evelyn. Reckless and arrogant. And one of these days it's going to catch up with you." "Why do you hate me so much?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "What did I ever do to you?" Wade's face went hard. "You want to know? Fine. You remind me of someone. Someone who came to this godforsaken place full of big ideas and promises. Someone who swore they'd never leave. And then winter came and reality set in, and they ran. Left people behind who'd started to care about them. Left wreckage in their wake. I'm not whoever hurt you, Wade. Aren't you? You're doing the exact same thing. Making yourself essential, making people need you. And when you leave, because you will leave, everyone you've tangled up in your life is going to be worse off than before you came. I'm not leaving. That's what she said too. Before Evelyn could respond, Dutch's voice called out from near the barn, "Wade, need you over here!" Wade shot her one last look of pure contempt, then stalked away. Evelyn stood alone in the corral with Reaper, her triumph completely hollowed out. Was Wade right? Was she being selfish, reckless? Was she hurting people by staying, by letting them care about her, when there was no guarantee she could handle this life long term? Reaper nudged her shoulder, pulling her from the spiral. She stroked his neck, fighting tears. "I'm staying," she whispered. "I have to stay." That evening, Caleb came in from the south pasture looking troubled. Evelyn was in the kitchen preparing dinner when he appeared in the doorway. "We need to talk," he said. Her stomach dropped. "All right." "Wade told me what you did today." "Of course he had. I can explain." "You rode Reaper." "Yes." Caleb's jaw tightened. "After I specifically told you to stay away from him." "I know what you told me." "Then why didn't you listen?" "Because I knew I could do it. Because he trusted me." "He's a dangerous animal, Evelyn. The fact that you stayed on his back once doesn't change that." "He's not dangerous. He's traumatized. There's a difference." Caleb crossed his arms. 3 men have been hurt trying to ride that horse. 3 trained cowboys with years of experience. What makes you think you're different? Because I didn't try to dominate him. I earned his trust first. You could have died, but I didn't. This time. What about next time? Evelyn set down the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables. Are we talking about the horse? Or about us? Caleb's expression shifted. What? You're not angry that I rode Reaper. You're angry that I did something dangerous without telling you. You're angry because you care what happens to me, and that scares you. Don't turn this around. I'm not. I'm just being honest. You're terrified of losing people, so you push them away before they can leave. But I'm not leaving, Caleb, no matter how hard you push. You can't promise that. Yes, I can. No, you can't. His voice rose. You don't know what winter's really like out here. You don't know what it's like to watch your cattle freeze to death, or to go 3 weeks without seeing another human face, or to wake up and realize you're so alone you can't remember what another person's voice sounds like. You've had a taste of it, sure, but you haven't lived it. Not really. And when you do, when the isolation and the cold and the endless work grind you down to nothing, you'll leave. Just like everyone else. The kitchen went silent. Evelyn stared at him, her heart breaking for the lonely man standing in front of her, so convinced he wasn't worth staying for. Who was she? Evelyn asked softly. What? The woman who left, the one who made you so sure everyone will abandon you. Caleb's face went pale. It doesn't matter. It does to me. Evelyn, please, I need to understand. He stood there for a long moment, visibly warring with himself. Then, slowly, he sat down at the table, suddenly looking older than his 41 years. Her name was Sarah, he said quietly. We were engaged 8 years ago. I met her in town. She was a teacher, smart, pretty, everything I thought I wanted. I brought her out here, showed her the ranch, told her about my plans. She seemed excited, said she wanted to build a life with me. Evelyn sat down across from him, waiting. We got through one winter, just one. By the time spring came, she was a ghost. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't talk, just stared out the window like she was looking for an escape route. I tried everything, brought her to town more often, hired a woman from Stanford to keep her company, even talked about building a bigger house with more windows. Nothing helped. What happened? She left in April, packed her things while I was out checking the cattle, took the wagon to town, and caught the eastbound train. Didn't even leave a note. I found out 3 months later she'd married a banker in St. Louis. He looked at Evelyn, his eyes haunted. She said the isolation was killing her, said she'd rather die than spend another winter in this place. I'm sorry. I tried again. Twice. Both times, same story. Women who thought they could handle this life, who lasted a few months before reality crushed them. He rubbed his face. I stopped trying after the second one left. Decided it was easier to be alone than to keep hoping someone might stay. Until you wrote that advertisement. Until I got drunk and stupid and convinced myself maybe things would be different this time. He met her eyes. But they won't be, Evelyn. You'll leave too. Maybe not today, maybe not this winter, but eventually, and I... His voice cracked. I can't go through that again. Evelyn reached across the table, took both his hands in hers. Look at me. He did. I am not Sarah. I'm not those other women. I came here knowing exactly how hard this life would be. I came here because I wanted something real, something I could build with my own hands. And yes, it's brutal. Yes, there are days I'm so tired I can barely stand. But I'm still here, Caleb. I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere. You can't know that. I know myself. I know what I'm capable of surviving. And I know that leaving this place, that would hurt worse than anything this land could throw at me. Caleb stared at their joined hands. I want to believe you. Then try. Take a chance on me. On us. And if you're wrong, if winter comes and you can't take it, then I'll be wrong, but I don't think I am. They sat there in the lamplight, the dinner forgotten, holding on to each other like drowning people holding on to a lifeline. Finally, Caleb spoke, his voice barely a whisper. I care about you more than I should, more than is smart. I care about you too. If you leave, I won't. But if you do, it'll destroy me. Evelyn squeezed his hands. Then it's a good thing I'm staying. He pulled her closer, kissed her forehead, and for a moment they just held each other while the house creaked around them and the last of the daylight faded outside. The next morning brought unexpected news. A rider from the Bridger Ranch arrived with a message. Tom's son wanted to sell off his father's prize breeding bull, and he was offering Caleb first chance at buying it. How much? Caleb asked. $500. The number hung in the air like lead. Caleb had $500, barely, but spending it would leave the ranch with almost nothing in reserve. One bad break and they'd be finished. But the bull was quality stock, could improve the whole herd, could be the difference between barely surviving and actually thriving. Dutch waited for Caleb's decision. The other men gathered around, sensing the weight of the moment. "What do you think?" Caleb asked Evelyn. She was startled he'd ask her opinion in front of the men. "It's your decision." "I'm asking what you think." Evelyn looked at the ranch hands, at Dutch's weathered face, at the ranch spread out behind them. "How good is this bull?" "Best in the basin," Dutch said. "Tom paid 3 times what your boss is asking for him. But his son doesn't know cattle, doesn't care, just wants quick cash." "And if we don't buy him?" "Patterson's ranch will, or one of the other big spreads. We won't get another chance at stock this good." Evelyn turned to Caleb. "Then we should buy him." Wade snorted. "We? You've been here 3 months. This isn't your ranch." "She's part of this operation," Caleb said sharply. "Her opinion matters." He sent Dutch to finalize the deal. The bull would arrive in a week. That night, lying in bed, Evelyn stared at the ceiling and wondered if she'd just helped make a terrible mistake. $500. The ranch's entire safety net. If anything went wrong, another bad storm, disease in the herd, a dozen other disasters, they'd have nothing to fall back on. But sometimes surviving meant taking risks. She understood that better than anyone. Over the following days, word of Evelyn riding Reaper spread through the basin faster than wildfire. When they went to town for supplies, people stared, some with curiosity, some with skepticism, some with outright disbelief. "That true what they're saying?" the general store owner asked. "You rode Caleb's devil horse?" "I rode Reaper, yes. Heard he bucked you clear into next week and you just held on through pure stubbornness." "Something like that." The man shook his head. "Lady, you're either crazy or the best horsewoman in Montana. Maybe both." When they left, Evelyn caught Caleb almost smiling. "What?" she asked. "Nothing, just, you're making quite a reputation for yourself. Is that a problem?" "No, it's impressive, actually." She felt warmth spread through her chest. Caleb's approval, rare as it was, meant everything. The bull arrived the following Tuesday, a massive red Hereford with horns like a throne and a temperament to match. It took 6 men to get him settled in the reinforced corral they'd prepared. Even Caleb looked impressed. "He'll do," Dutch said, which was high praise from the taciturn foreman. That evening, as they all gathered for dinner, the atmosphere felt different. Lighter, somehow. The men were actually joking with each other, and Carson told a story about a bull he'd worked with in Wyoming that had everyone laughing. Even Wade seemed less hostile, though he still avoided looking directly at Evelyn. After dinner, Caleb pulled her aside. "Come with me. I want to show you something." He led her out to the barn, up a ladder to the hayloft. There, stored carefully in a wooden crate, was a collection of leather-working tools. "My father's," Caleb said. "He made saddles, beautiful work. When he died, I kept these, thinking maybe I'd learn the craft someday. Never did." "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I want you to have them." Evelyn stared at him. "Caleb, I can't. You work with your hands. You're good at detailed work. And you need a project for the long winter months ahead, something that's yours." She touched one of the tools reverently. "This is too much." "It's not enough. For everything you've done. Everything you are." Before she could respond, he kissed her, slower this time, deeper, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. Evelyn melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, and for those perfect moments, nothing else existed. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Please stay." "I'm not going anywhere," she promised. "Not now. Not ever." They stood in the hayloft as darkness fell outside, holding each other like they could keep the uncertain future at bay through sheer will alone. The next morning, Evelyn woke to chaos. Someone was shouting outside, boots thundering across the porch. She threw on her robe and ran downstairs to find Dutch in the kitchen, his face grim. What's wrong? Reaper broke out of his corral. He's loose on the range. Evelyn's blood ran cold. How? Don't know. Gate was locked last night. Either someone left it open or he jumped the fence. Either way, he's gone. Caleb appeared, already dressed. How long ago? Carson spotted the empty corral at first light. He could be miles away by now. We need to find him before he hurts himself. Or someone else. Caleb turned to Evelyn. You know him better than anyone. Where would he go? She thought fast. Somewhere open, somewhere he can run. The north pasture, maybe, near the creek. Dutch, get the men mounted. We'll split up, cover more ground. What about me? Evelyn asked. You stay here. Caleb, please, just this once, stay where it's safe. She wanted to argue but saw the fear in his eyes. Fear for Reaper. Fear for her. She nodded. The men rode out, and Evelyn was left alone with her worry and the terrible certainty that something had gone wrong. She spent the morning pacing, unable to focus on any task. Around noon, Carson returned. Found him, he said. North pasture, just like you thought. But there's a problem. What problem? He's hurt. Looks like he tried to jump a barbed wire fence and got tangled. Cut himself up pretty bad. Evelyn's heart stopped. He's alive, but he won't let anyone near him. Caleb's there now, trying to calm him down. But every time someone gets close, Reaper goes crazy. She was moving before Carson finished talking, grabbing her coat, heading for the door. Miss Hart, wait. Get a medical kit. Bandages, clean water, whatever you've got for wounds, bring it to the north pasture. You can't, just do it. She ran to the barn, saddled Molly with shaking hands, and rode out faster than she'd ever ridden before. The north pasture was 3 miles away. She covered it in 20 minutes, pushing the mare harder than she should have. She found them by this creek, Caleb and Dutch standing 30 feet away from Reaper, who was backed against a rock outcropping, bleeding from a dozen cuts, wild-eyed and dangerous. Evelyn, what are you doing here? Caleb demanded. He won't let you help him, but he'll let me. It's too dangerous. I don't care. She dismounted, approached slowly. Reaper's eyes locked on her, and she saw the fear and pain blazing in them. Hey, beautiful, she said softly. It's okay. It's me. I'm here. The stallion's ears flicked forward. I know you're scared. I know you're hurting, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? She took another step. Reaper tensed, but didn't bolt. That's it. Good boy. Such a good boy. Behind her, she heard Caleb's sharp intake of breath, but she didn't turn. All her focus was on the terrified horse bleeding in front of her. She reached him, placed her hand on his neck. He shuddered but held still. I've got you, she whispered. I've got you. Carson arrived with the medical supplies. Working slowly, talking constantly, Evelyn cleaned Reaper's wounds while the stallion stood trembling beneath her hands. The cuts weren't as bad as they looked, painful but not life-threatening. When she finished, Reaper lowered his head and rested it against her shoulder, exhausted and grateful. Caleb appeared beside her, his face unreadable. You shouldn't have come, he said. Yes, I should have. You could have been hurt, but I wasn't. He looked at her, at the horse trusting her completely, and something in his expression broke open. You're extraordinary, you know that? I'm just doing what needs to be done. No, you're doing the impossible, again. They led Reaper back to the ranch together, Evelyn walking beside the stallion, while Caleb rode ahead to prepare a clean stall. The other men watched in silence as she brought the devil horse home, calm and docile as a lamb. That night, after Reaper was settled and everyone else had gone to bed, Caleb found Evelyn in the barn checking on the stallion one more time. You saved him, he said. He saved me first. What do you mean? Evelyn stroked Reaper's nose through the stall bars. When I came here, I was lost, scared that I'd never be good enough, never matter to anyone. But this horse, this impossible broken horse, trusted me, needed me, made me believe I could be more than what everyone said I was. Caleb moved closer. You've always been more than that. Have I? Yes. He turned her to face him. You're the strongest person I've ever met. The bravest. And He stopped, struggling with words. I love you, Evelyn. I'm terrified of it, and I don't know what to do with it, but it's true. I love you. Tears blurred her vision. I love you too. They kissed in the quiet barn, surrounded by the warm smell of horses and hay, and it felt like coming home to a place Evelyn hadn't known existed until she found it. When morning came, the ranch felt different, not transformed into something soft or easy, but settled in a way it hadn't been before. Evelyn woke to find frost patterns on her window, and Caleb's confession still warm in her chest like a coal she could carry through the coldest winter. She dressed quickly, went downstairs to find him already in the kitchen, making coffee. He looked up when she entered, and something passed between them that needed no words. Morning, he said. Morning. They worked side by side preparing breakfast for the men, their movements synchronized like a dance they'd been practicing for months without realizing it. When Dutch came down, followed by the others, the foreman took one look at Caleb and Evelyn and smiled into his coffee cup. Weather's supposed to hold steady for a few days, Dutch announced. Good time to start on the bunkhouse foundation if we're serious about rebuilding before spring. We're serious, Caleb said. Soon as we finish breakfast, let's mark out the site. Wade, who'd been quiet throughout the meal, finally spoke. What about the devil horse? He's staying in the barn permanent now? His name is Reaper, Evelyn said evenly. And yes, he'll stay in the barn until he's fully healed. Then what? You planning to ride him regular? If he'll let me. Wade shook his head but said nothing more. The hostility that had defined their interactions for months seemed to have dulled into mere disapproval, which Evelyn counted as progress. After breakfast, the men headed out to begin work on the bunkhouse. Evelyn cleaned up the kitchen, then grabbed her coat and headed to the barn. Reaper nickered when he saw her, his wounds already looking better after just one night of rest and care. Hey, beautiful boy, she murmured, slipping into his stall. How are you feeling? The stallion pressed his nose against her chest, and Evelyn wrapped her arms around his massive neck. This creature, this impossible, broken creature, had become her mirror. In saving him, she'd somehow saved herself. She spent the next hour treating his cuts with salve, changing bandages, talking to him in the quiet voice that always calmed him. When she finally emerged from the barn, she found Caleb leaning against the corral fence, watching her. How's he doing? He asked. Better. He'll heal. Thanks to you. Evelyn joined him at the fence. I've been thinking. About? Everything. This ranch? Us? What comes next? Caleb's expression grew cautious. What about it? I want to help more. Really help. Not just with cooking and cleaning, but with the ranch itself. I want to learn cattle work, help with the breeding program, maybe even break some of the younger horses. That's a lot. I know, but I'm capable of it, and I want to earn my place here, not just as your... She hesitated, uncertain what to call herself. As my what? Caleb prompted, his eyes searching her face. I don't know. What am I to you? He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Everything. You're everything. That's not a title. No, but it's the truth. He paused. What do you want to be? Evelyn looked out across the ranch, the land she'd come to love despite its brutality, the home she'd built from nothing but stubbornness and hope. Your partner, in all of this. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I'd like that. But partnership means sharing everything, the good and the bad, the profits and the losses, the decisions that could make us or break us. I know. And if we fail, if this ranch goes under despite everything we do, we fail together. I'm not afraid of failing. I'm only afraid of not trying. He kissed her then, right there in the open where anyone could see, and when they broke apart, Dutch was standing by the barn, grinning like he'd just won money on a bet. Don't stop on my account, the foreman called. It's about damn time. Caleb actually laughed, a real laugh that Evelyn had never heard before. The sound of it made her chest ache with happiness. The following week settled into a new rhythm. The men worked on rebuilding the bunkhouse, the structure rising slowly from the frozen ground. Evelyn threw herself into learning every aspect of ranch management. She rode out with Dutch to check cattle, learned to spot illness in the herd, helped repair fence line until her hands were blistered and raw. The work was brutal. She came back exhausted every night, so tired she could barely eat dinner. But she never complained, never faltered. And slowly, grudgingly, even Wade started to respect her. One evening, after a particularly hard day moving cattle from one pasture to another, Wade actually spoke to her without hostility. "You did good work today," he said. Evelyn almost dropped the plate she was washing. "Thank you. Don't let it go to your head. You still got a lot to learn." "I know I do." He hesitated, then added, "But you're learning faster than most, and you don't quit, even when you probably should. I can respect that." It wasn't an apology for months of antagonism, but it was something. Evelyn took it. "Wade," she said carefully, "the woman who left, the one you mentioned before, what was her name?" His face closed off immediately. "Doesn't matter. It matters to you. She's gone. That's all you need to know." "Did you love her?" Wade's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Evelyn thought he might storm out, but then something in him crumbled. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I loved her. Thought she loved me too. But this life, the isolation, the work, the endless winter, it broke her. And when she left, she took a piece of me with her. I'm sorry." "Don't be. Just don't do the same thing to Caleb. He's been through enough." "I won't. You say that now, but winter's coming on hard, and you haven't seen the worst of it yet. When January hits and the temperature stays below zero for weeks, when the snow's so deep you can't see the fence posts, when you go days without seeing the sun, that's when people break. That's when they realize what they've signed up for." "I won't break." Wade looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time she saw something other than hostility in his eyes. Maybe belief. Maybe hope. "I think you might actually mean that," he said. "I do." He nodded slowly, then left her alone in the kitchen. December arrived with a vengeance. The cold settled over the basin like a physical weight, temperatures dropping so low that spit froze before it hit the ground. The men finished the bunkhouse foundation, but actual construction had to wait for warmer weather. They continued sleeping in the main house, which had grown less chaotic as everyone adjusted to the arrangement. Reaper healed completely, the cuts from the barbed wire fading to thin white scars beneath his black coat. Evelyn rode him regularly now, and the stallion had gentled to the point where he'd follow her around the corral like an oversized dog. One afternoon, she was working with Reaper in the corral when Wade approached. "Caleb says you're ready to show off what you've done with that horse," he said. "Show off to who?" "All of us. He wants to see you ride him proper. Not just walking around the corral, but really ride him." Evelyn's stomach flipped. "When?" "Now. Everyone's waiting." She looked toward the barn and saw the entire crew gathered. Caleb, Dutch, Miller, Carson, all of them watching. Her mouth went dry. "I don't know if he's ready for an audience. Only one way to find out." Evelyn took a deep breath, then led Reaper to the center of the corral. The stallion sensed the attention, his muscles tensing beneath her hands. "Easy," she murmured. "It's just us. Nothing's changed." She mounted slowly, settling into the saddle with practiced ease. Reaper shifted beneath her, nervous but not panicked. The men watched in silence. Evelyn nudged the stallion forward. He walked, then trotted, responding to her cues like they'd been partners for years instead of months. She guided him through figure eights, stopped him, backed him up, asked him to side pass. Every movement was careful, controlled, the product of countless hours of patient work. Finally, she asked for a canter. Reaper hesitated, then surged forward, powerful muscles bunching and releasing beneath her. They circled the corral once, twice, 3 times, and Evelyn felt like she was flying. When she finally pulled him to a stop in front of the gathered men, there was absolute silence. Then Dutch started clapping. Miller joined in. Carson. Even Wade, slowly, grudgingly, brought his hands together. Caleb's face was unreadable, but his eyes were bright with something that looked like pride. Evelyn dismounted, her legs shaking from adrenaline. Reaper stood calmly beside her, and she realized the impossible had become ordinary. The devil horse that had terrorized the ranch for years was now just another working animal, gentled through patience and trust. "Well," Dutch said, breaking the silence, "I'll be damned." "You've got a gift, Miss Hart," Miller added. "A real gift." Wade said nothing, just gave her a single nod of acknowledgement before walking away. Caleb approached, ran his hand along Reaper's neck. "You did it. Actually did it." "We did it," Evelyn corrected. He did most of the work. I just gave him a reason to try. No, you gave him something he'd never had before. Someone who saw him as more than just a problem to be solved. They stood there beside the black stallion, and Evelyn realized this moment was about more than just horses. It was about what happened when you refused to give up on something broken, when you saw potential instead of damage, when you loved something enough to let it heal on its own terms. That evening, as they sat together after dinner, Caleb took her hand. "I've been thinking," he said. "About what?" "About making this official, you and me, this partnership." Evelyn's heart started pounding. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want you to stay. Not as a hired hand or a mail order arrangement, but as my wife. If you'll have me." She stared at him. "Are you proposing? I know I'm not doing it right. Should probably have a ring, should probably be on one knee, but I've never been good at pretty words or romantic gestures. All I've got is the truth. I love you. I need you. And I want to spend whatever time I've got left on this earth building something with you." Evelyn felt tears streaming down her face. "That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Is that a yes?" "Yes, yes, of course it's yes." He kissed her, and the men who were still in the kitchen started whooping and hollering. Dutch produced a bottle of whiskey from somewhere, and suddenly everyone was celebrating, passing the bottle around, clapping Caleb on the back. Even Wade cracked a smile. "About damn time," Dutch said, raising the bottle. "To Caleb and Evelyn, may they be as stubborn together as they are apart." Everyone drank to that. Later, after the celebration had died down and everyone had gone to bed, Evelyn and Caleb stood on the porch, looking out at the frozen landscape. "You know this won't be easy," Caleb said. "Even with both of us working, the ranch barely makes it year to year. There'll be times we go hungry, times we wonder if we made the right choice, times we want to give up." "I know. And I'm not always easy to live with. I get moody, I work too hard, I forget to talk about what's bothering me. I'm not perfect either. I'm stubborn, I take too many risks. I don't always listen when people tell me no." He smiled. "I noticed. So we'll figure it out together, the good days and the bad ones." "Together," he agreed. They married 3 weeks later in the small church in Stanford, with Dutch standing as Caleb's witness, and Martha from the general store standing as Evelyn's. It was a simple ceremony, nothing fancy. But when Caleb slipped the plain gold band onto her finger, Evelyn felt like she was making a promise bigger than words could hold. The basin was buzzing with gossip, the seamstress from Helena marrying the hermit rancher, the woman who'd tamed the devil horse. Let them talk. Evelyn had stopped caring what people thought the day she decided to stay. January came hard and mean, just like Wade had warned. Temperatures plunged, snow piled so deep they had to dig tunnels to get from the house to the barn. The cattle huddled together for warmth, and every morning they'd ride out to check for losses. They lost 7 head that first month. Each death hit Caleb hard, but Evelyn was there to shoulder the grief with him. They'd sit together at night, going over the books, figuring out how to stretch every dollar, planning for spring. The new bull they'd bought proved his worth almost immediately. The heifers he'd serviced in the fall started showing signs of pregnancy. By February, it was clear they'd have a strong crop of calves come spring. "We might actually make it," Caleb said one night, staring at the ledgers with something like hope in his eyes. "We will make it," Evelyn corrected. And somehow, impossibly, they did. Winter began to break in March. The days grew longer, the snow started melting, and green appeared on the prairie like a promise kept. The men finished the bunkhouse and moved back out, giving Caleb and Evelyn the house to themselves again. The first calves were born in April, strong, healthy stock that commanded good prices at market. The ranch, which had been barely surviving, started to thrive. But success didn't come smooth or easy. There were setbacks. A late frost killed some of the early grass. 3 calves were lost to coyotes. The barn roof needed replacing, which cost money they barely had. Through it all, Evelyn and Caleb worked side by side. She learned to deliver calves, treat sick cattle, negotiate with buyers at market. He learned to share the burden of decisions, to ask for help when he needed it, to trust that he wasn't alone anymore. They fought sometimes. Loud arguments about money, about risk, about whether to expand the herd or play it safe. But they always came back together, always found their way through the disagreement to something stronger on the other side. One evening in May, after a particularly hard day of branding calves, They sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the prairie gold and red. You ever regret it? Caleb asked. Staying here? Evelyn thought about Helena, about the life she'd left behind. The cramped apartment above the dress shop, the customers who'd looked through her like she was invisible. The suffocating certainty that she'd never be more than someone's spinster sister, someone's burden, someone's charity case. No, she said. Not once. Not even during the worst of winter? Especially not then. Because that's when I knew for sure this was real, that we were real. Caleb took her hand, laced his fingers through hers. I was so certain I was better off alone. Safer that way. Easier. And now? Now I know I was just scared. Scared of needing someone, scared of losing them, scared of feeling anything that might hurt. He looked at her. You made me brave enough to try. You made me brave enough to stay. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, and Evelyn thought about all the broken things that had found each other on this harsh Montana ranch. A lonely man convinced he wasn't worth loving. A discarded woman certain she'd never matter to anyone. A wild horse everyone had given up on. They'd all been wrong about themselves. All been taught that being difficult or damaged or different meant being unworthy of care. And they'd all learned, slowly and painfully, that the opposite was true. The hardest things to love were often the most worth loving. The people and creatures who fought back, who refused to be easy, who demanded patience and understanding and real effort, they were the ones who changed you, who made you better, who taught you that love wasn't about finding someone perfect, but about choosing someone real and showing up for them every single day. Evelyn had come to Montana expecting nothing. Maybe a roof over her head, maybe a chance to stop running. She'd found something infinitely more valuable, a place where her strength wasn't a liability, but an asset, where her stubbornness was respected, where her refusal to quit was exactly what was needed. And she'd found Caleb, a man as damaged and determined as she was, someone who understood that survival meant more than just enduring. It meant choosing to build something worth surviving for. The ranch would never be easy. There would be more hard winters, more losses, more moments when they wondered if they could keep going. But they would, together. Because that's what love really was. Not the absence of struggle, but the willingness to struggle alongside someone, to share the weight, to refuse to let go even when letting go would be simpler. June brought the yearly cattle sale. Caleb and Evelyn drove a portion of the herd to market, and the prices were good, better than they'd been in years. On the way home, Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop on a hill overlooking the ranch. Look at that, he said. Evelyn looked. The ranch stretched out below them, the house with its new shutters, the rebuilt bunkhouse, the corrals full of healthy horses and cattle, the barn with its patched roof. It looked like a working ranch, like a home, like something built to last. We did that, Caleb said. You and me. And Dutch, and Miller, and Carson, even Wade. But mostly us. Evelyn leaned against his shoulder. Yeah, mostly us. That evening, after they'd settled back into the routine of the ranch, Evelyn went to check on Reaper. The stallion was in his corral, calm and content, so different from the wild, broken creature she'd first encountered. Hey, beautiful boy, she said. Reaper walked over, pressed his nose into her hands. She scratched behind his ears, and he made a sound of pure contentment. You know what I learned from you, she said softly, that being hard to love doesn't mean being unlovable. It just means you need someone patient enough to see past the walls to what's underneath. The horse huffed into her hair, and Evelyn smiled. The next morning, Wade approached her at breakfast. He looked uncomfortable, like whatever he was about to say was costing him something. I owe you an apology, he said. The kitchen went quiet. Even Caleb looked up from his coffee. For what? Evelyn asked. For being an ass. For trying to make you fail. For assuming you'd leave like... He stopped, swallowed hard. Like she did. You proved me wrong. About you. About what a woman can handle out here. About a lot of things. And I'm sorry. Evelyn stood, walked over to him, and held out her hand. Apology accepted. Wade shook her hand, his grip firm. You're tougher than half the cowboys I've known. And Caleb's lucky to have you. I think we're lucky to have each other. Yeah, you are. From that day forward, Wade became one of their strongest allies. He worked harder, complained less, and even started teaching Evelyn some of the finer points of cattle handling. The ranch, which had felt divided for so long, finally became a team. Summer passed in a blur of hard work and small joys. Evelyn started a vegetable garden behind the house. Caleb built her a workshop where she could work with the leather tools he'd given her. She made her first saddle, clumsy and imperfect, but functional, and Caleb wore it with pride. The new calves grew strong. The herd expanded. Slowly, carefully, the ranch's finances stabilized. One August evening, Evelyn realized she was late. Not for dinner or chores, but late in a way that made her hands shake as she counted backwards through the calendar. She didn't say anything to Caleb right away. Waited another week to be sure. Then another. When she was finally certain, she found him in the barn repairing tack. "I need to tell you something," she said. He looked up. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right, actually." She took a breath. "I'm pregnant." Caleb froze, the leather strap falling from his hands. "You're pregnant. We're having a baby." For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then he crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed. "We're having a baby," he repeated, like he couldn't quite believe it. "We are." "When?" "March, I think. Maybe early April." He set her down gently, his hands on her shoulders, his eyes searching her face. "Are you scared?" "Terrified." "Me too." "But good terrified. The kind that means something matters." "Yeah," Caleb agreed. "The good kind." That evening, they told the crew. Dutch let out a whoop and immediately started planning modifications to the house to make room for a nursery. Miller and Carson congratulated them both. Wade clapped Caleb on the back and said, "About time this place had some young blood around." As Evelyn stood in this kitchen, surrounded by these rough men who'd become her family, she felt something settle deep in her bones. This was home. Not just the place, but these people. This life they'd built together from nothing but stubbornness and hope. Fall arrived with its usual beauty, the prairie grass turning gold, the aspens on the mountains blazing yellow and red. They harvested the garden, put up vegetables for winter, prepared the ranch for another brutal season of cold. But this time they were ready. The bunkhouse was solid. The barn roof was secure. The herd was strong. And they had each other. One October morning, Evelyn woke early and went to the window. Frost covered the world in silver, and in the corral below she could see Reaper standing calmly beside the other horses. No longer isolated, no longer feared, just another member of the herd. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The desperate woman who'd stepped off that train 8 months ago with one suitcase and nowhere else to go. She'd been broken then, in her own way, convinced she was too difficult, too stubborn, too much of everything wrong. But this place had taught her different, had shown her that strength wasn't something to apologize for, that being hard to love just meant you needed the right kind of love, the patient, stubborn, determined kind that refused to quit even when things got difficult. Caleb had given her that, and she'd given it back to him. 2 impossible people finding each other in an impossible place and choosing every single day to make it work. That was the real story. Not some fairy tale where love conquered all, but the harder truth that love was a choice you made again and again. To show up, to try, to stay even when staying was the hardest thing you could do. She placed her hand on her still flat stomach, thought about the child growing there. Another impossible thing becoming real. "Your parents are both stubborn as hell," she whispered, "but they're also brave and patient, and so full of love they don't always know what to do with it. You're going to be just fine." Behind her, Caleb stirred in bed. "You talking to yourself?" "Talking to our daughter." "Daughter? You know something I don't?" "Just a feeling." He got up, wrapped his arms around her from behind, his hand joining hers on her stomach. Daughter or son, doesn't matter, long as they're half as strong as their mother. And half as good as their father. They stood at the window watching the sun rise over their ranch, their home, their future. Below, Reaper lifted his head and looked up at them, and Evelyn could swear the stallion was smiling. Winter came again, as brutal as promised. But this time, when the temperature plunged and the snow piled high, Evelyn didn't feel trapped or isolated. She felt safe, warm, surrounded by people who cared about her, working toward a future that mattered. She rode Reaper through the snow on the good days, and the black stallion carried her with a gentleness that would have shocked anyone who'd known him before. On the bad days, when the cold was too dangerous, she worked in her shop making saddles and bridles, her hands learning the craft Caleb's father had mastered. By February, her pregnancy was showing. The men treated her like she was made of glass, which drove her crazy until Caleb told them to back off and let her work. "She's pregnant, not dying," he said. "Woman's tougher than all of us combined." Evelyn loved him fiercely for that. Their daughter was born on a cold morning in late March, arriving with lusty cries that echoed through the house. Dutch rode to town for the doctor, but by the time they returned, Evelyn had delivered the baby with just Caleb's help and her own grit. They named her Sarah, after Caleb's mother, a way of honoring the past while building something new. As Evelyn held her daughter for the first time, looking into those dark eyes that were somehow both brand new and ancient, she thought about all the people who'd told her she'd never be worth anything, all the voices that had said she was too difficult, too stubborn, too much. They'd been wrong, all of them, because here, in this harsh place with this stubborn man in this impossible life, she'd found exactly what she was meant for. Not because she'd changed herself to fit someone else's expectations, but because she'd finally found people who valued her exactly as she was. That was the lesson, she realized, the thing she'd learned from Reaper, from Caleb, from this brutal Montana ranch. You didn't earn love by making yourself smaller or easier or more palatable. You earned it by being unflinchingly yourself and finding the people brave enough to love you anyway. The people and creatures who demanded patience, who required understanding, who refused to be simple. They weren't problems to be solved. They were challenges to be met, puzzles to be worked through, walls to be climbed with care and determination. And on the other side of that wall was something worth every minute of struggle. Connection, partnership, love that ran bone deep because it had been earned, not given freely. That spring, as the prairie turned green and the cattle dropped their calves and the ranch came alive again, Evelyn would ride out with baby Sarah strapped to her back and Reaper beneath her. The black stallion moved carefully, protectively, aware of his precious cargo. And sometimes, just sometimes, Caleb would ride beside them on steady, and they'd survey their land together. This family built from broken pieces, this impossible thing that had become real through sheer determination and love. The ranch would never be easy. The winters would always be brutal. The work would always be hard. But they'd face it together, these stubborn souls who'd refuse to give up on themselves or each other. And that, Evelyn thought as she looked at her husband and daughter and the endless Montana sky, was worth more than all the easy love in the world. Because the things we fight for are the things that change us. The people who challenge us are the ones who make us better. And the love that survives the brutal winters is the love that lasts forever. The black stallion that once threw every rider now carried a woman and child with infinite care. The lonely rancher who'd sworn off love had opened his heart again. And the seamstress from Helena, who'd been told she'd never matter, had built a life that mattered more than anything. Not because it was easy, but because it was real.